everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Today it's all about me, Jeannie Warner, and my guest. Welcome Dawn Akemi for episode 204.
Hi.
We're so glad to have you, Dawn. As it turns out, it's a very small world. Dawn and I have two friends in common, Lynn and Nate. And Dawn has finished, I believe this is your first novel, correct? Pono and Aloha versus the Zero-Sum Game?
Yes, it is. Thank you. And thank you for having me, by the way.
I am so delighted. I really liked your book. I mean, I always try to read everybody's and I say in different ways, but for the listener out there who thinks, wow, so far Jeannie has exactly my taste in books, I do want to trigger you straight up that it has some trigger warnings on sexual assault, domestic violence, mental health, but the way these are handled, I think is important. And I really liked that, Dawn. I mean, all of it all the way through. This is not just about that, but I have to start with the trigger warning.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that because on the one hand, I really wanted to be sensitive to anybody who's had trauma. But at the same time, a lot of these trigger warnings, they're kind of a spoiler for plot. And there's going to be an anticipation that, oh, there's going to be domestic violence or, oh, there's going to be this or that. And so I was very conscious of that, which is why when I put it on my webpage, I actually, you have to do an extra click to be able to read it. I obscured it just in case, I don't know, somebody accidentally came upon it and wasn't interested in the trigger, but wanted to read the book.
I actually really liked the line that you put, that demons do not go away when we hide from them.
Mm-hmm.
So before people click away from this episode, if you were going to, this is the way that the stories you told need to be told. There's a lot of dirty laundry out there in the world, and many cultures run into blame and shame. And sometimes they really blame and shame the victims. But I think there was a landmark book, I don't know if you ever read it, Robin McKinley wrote Deerskin, which was a retelling of Donkey Skin by, I think, Charles Perrault. And like her retelling, yours is not an easy book, but I think it's an important one.
Oh, gosh, thank you. I think, you want to tell things that are, well, it's not easy to be a human being, right? And you want to tell things that are about what it's like to live and be. And so you don't avoid those stories that about ourselves that are ugly. You want to tell those as well as what's beautiful and kind of have them all together so that we can really experience what it is to live and be a human on the planet Earth,
Exactly. And one of the things that I loved about yours is for people that love Greek myths, we look at the old Greek myths and we say, wow, Zeus was a complete horn dog and a rapist and all of the,
yeah.
I mean, none of those gods were great, right?
Right.
For those people that are watching chaos online, and we all grieve when something happens to the kitten even more than when he kills a baby. And it's hard, but it's real. And it's sort of like if the gods are reflective of that, you brought in and talked about supernatural elements of the native spirits on and around the Hawaiian Islands and other Polynesian islands and brought it in with talks of colonialization. And you combined it with how even supernatural powers can fuck up with the best of intentions. And so between all of that together, it mitigates that one difficult scene and makes it natural, I think. And so I hope all of the listeners are out there going to stay with us because this is a really good, well-written book. So let's go on. Dawn, I loved this.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, really, it was a lot of work. So you're always grateful. You want people to enjoy it. And so it really feels good when they do.
Well, I was trying to think out of when you think about who are the enemies, who are the protagonists. And honestly, these same protagonists are the same protagonists we have through history, which is a little bit of capitalism, which is not that new. Greed, it's just another version.
Yeah.
And your book has big flashing lights of the dangers of the easy or fast solution.
Yeah.
And I really think that, wrapped in, this is all set in Hawaii. You'll have to tell me which island again because I've forgotten. Was it Oahu?
Yes, it is Oahu, which is the main island. It's the one with Honolulu and Waikiki. It's the one most people visit.
Right. I've been to Oahu. I've been to the Big Island. I want to visit more of them. But I loved that you get very deep into the Hawaiian spirituality and the different layers of not even just colonial spirituality, but you have people from this Polynesian island that found their way to Hawaii, and people that came from Japan and other Southeastern islands who came in like layers upon layers as different people got there, and they all brought their gods or spirits with them, didn't they?
Well, yes, and one of the important themes in my story is the diversity. And in truth, the spirit world I created, it's got elements of mythology from Hawaii, but it's also, I just yanked stuff from all over the world and created Kumulipo, which is the spirit world in Hawaii, or for Amy's spirit world. But that spirit world doesn't exist in anybody's imagination. There's no mythology that surrounds that, except for the fact that Kumulipo, the word Kumulipo, which I named the spirit world after, it's a Hawaiian creation chant. It's basically their origin story or their creation story. I hesitate to make comparisons, but if you wanted to, it'd be maybe like the Bible or something like that. But it's not at all like that.
I think you can. Every culture has an origin story. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we've wondered about since the dawn of time. Like, where did we come from? Who did us? What was the important name of the octopus god? Please forgive me.
And I chose Kumulipo because I felt that this was the lead protagonist, creation story, her coming of age. After this, she will never be the same, and she's going to be a new person from here on out. So,
Well, it is, and we are the sum of our experiences and our changes as we look in things, and that's for better or ill. One of the things that I appreciated about is you kind of told a story that many of my friends have had happen from trusted loved ones, and sometimes it's even when the young girls have been abused by family members, it's often the ones that they liked.
yes,
And that's hard for people to understand that maybe it's not the weird old evil uncle. Sometimes it's the beloved hot one.
yeah, yeah, and one who's very conflicted himself. He's not a.
Yeah.
I really tried to steer away from pat evil.
Well, you made he's not the bad guy.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, spoiler. Her uncle isn't the bad guy.
No,
He really is not. And he deeply regrets in a very dramatic and final way. But the bad guys are different. He's a symptom of a problem. He's a symptom of mental health. And I love that you brought up in a certain way, there's mental health throughout the spirit world problems too, of these spirits have been abused by those spirits and are brought up and are being used and manufactured in a cruel and unpleasant fashion in order to create more gold for this one and that one. And it just made me cheer that years ago Captain Cook got stabbed right in his colonizing neck, because these are great stories.
well, it's interesting because Captain Cook, he was stabbed, and it turned out to be a skirmish over some stolen property off the ship, if I'm remembering correctly.
Probably.
My other favorite story about Captain Cook is that he discovered, and when I say discovered, it's with air quotes, he discovered Australia as well as Hawaii.
Yes, yes, they have a lot to say about him down there too. So
Yeah. So anyway.
But I kind of want to ask your process I mean, this clearly came from some personal experience, the experience of friends, stories, watching. I have been around Oahu and we drove around the island, so I can see it all. And there is an interesting area of, yes, this is where you have the Christian, people that have to go out and we must civilize the natives. And here's that area of, we've turned this part of this island looks a lot like Ohio. And then this part over here is a little bit more natural. And it's fascinating, all of that leveled on top of it. And I love that you bring that out. If you want to visit Oahu, read Dawn's book here, because you get a lot of vision of that.
Well, and the history of Hawaii was very important to me in developing my story. It's a very big part of the spiritual world, too. The three spirits that are there, they basically represent the three races or three ethnicities, I should say, or nationality, of those who were anytime in power in Hawaii. So originally it was the Hawaiians, because they were there first. And then for a good many years in the modern era, in their modern history, after the discovery of Captain Cook, they were ruling Hawaii. They were a sovereign nation ruled by kings and queen and a queen.
Yeah.
Before the overthrow of the kingdom, which didn't happen until 1893. And then they didn't even become a state until 1898, which it's interesting. The people that overthrew Liliuokalani, she is the last queen of Hawaii. The people that overthrew her were the businessmen, the descendants of missionaries for the most part. They were growing sugar all over the island, right? And they wanted to become a state immediately of America, but they were refused at first. For me, at first, a couple of reasons, but one major reason was many of the Southern senators did not want a state where brown people would be represented in the Congress.
Right. No, no.
I find,
I was just actually digging through a map on Sundowner Towns of America, and yes, this is why Puerto Rico still isn't a state.
yeah, it's very familiar. Even though it was 100 years ago, over 100 years, 120, more than 120 years ago, that these things were going on, and yet we still have these same problems.
It's coming to light though, and that's one of the importances of books like this is you introduced history and you talk about history, but it's not a force feeding history down somebody's throat. It's like a this is what happened, which is set up this, which is set up this, and how in yours you have the humans, what happened, how they influence the spirit world, and how the spirit world says, oh, we're going to try to make something better. Here's a solution. Oh, is that a good solution? Is it a long-term solution? I mean, there apparently are very few good long-term project or program managers in the spirit world.
Well, I'm really just we're poking fun at capitalism there. So
Yeah, well,
in the
you're
spirit world.
talking to a girl who's been through a lot of C-suite and rolled her eyes and said, how did that human being rise so high within this organization?
Yeah, it's when it comes to how we deal with money in our society, we do look too much at the short term solution and how we try and control the economy. We don't worry about the long term effects of our decisions, which is why, one of the things that comes up all the time is climate change and fossil fuels. And that was a solution for energy. But even as we're losing control of our environment, or not that we ever had control, but we're impacting our environment more directly with the emission of carbon fuels, we're still not able to back away from this plan easily.
Well, it goes deeper and further back than that. I met a man from Iraq who was once talking about, he says, yeah, our big problem is that everybody venerated sheep and you had to sacrifice sheep to your gods, and that was important. Everybody loved sheep, and my God, we all ate mutton and lamb. But sheep are terrible for the environment. So that used to be this verdant, beautiful green, that the Middle East used to be prettier, but we had like a few thousand years of sheep that literally ate everything green on the landscape.
Yeah, it was once called the Fertile Crescent for good reason.
It was called the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah,
Now it's a desert. And
yeah,
but nobody thought, hey, we should look about this long term, much in the way I'm in California. 3 generations ago, there's people that sold away their water rights saying, well, I don't need to worry about that. Plenty of water falls from the sky. I don't need the groundwater. Flash forward. Here's
yeah. If we could take time to wonder more directly about the impacts, and maybe it's too hard. We can't plan for everything,
yeah.
but then there's even once you see things going wrong. What did they set Freud? Is it a Freud where people who do if you're doing stupidity is when you keep doing the same thing even though you learn it wrong. I'm
Yes,
saying it very
yes.
badly.
Insanity is the
Oh, that's it.
definition of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, there you go.
On the other hand, science is based on doing the same and repeating it until we can get the same results. So it's a fine line
Right.
between science and insanity, and I respect that line.
Well, and even science, it's the interpretation of results, and that's always going to go through a personal filter before you can even understand. And that's why sometimes scientists debate; they still debate for the same results as to whether this or that is true.
Well, this brings me to kind of it's a new favorite question, and you're going to have to endure it for me first because I haven't really talked about this that much, but why we need storytelling. And it's not, we've frequently talked about it in the past, like people need to read memoirs so they can read something outside the history books that's the story of real people, but not just to read stories. Why do we need to write them? Dawn, tell me why you needed to write this book.
I think there's a lot of reasons why we need storytelling. I definitely needed to write a book because I want to communicate things that I feel are meaningful. It's very hard to do just by interacting daily with people. You often are stuck with mundane matters, and so the things that I think more deeply about, I definitely wanted to put it in the story. I think storytelling connects us to. I believe in that whole collective unconscious, and that Carl Jung talks about, where this is how we come to understand ourselves better, is through story. It connects ourselves to our emotions more just succinctly. To read a story that is impactful or it affects you, definitely connects you to your emotions that might be hard to face, because you were talking about earlier difficult things to talk about, like let's say sexual assault or whatever, but they definitely need to be talked about. You need to try and understand why these things happen, and then if it has happened to you, you want to understand how to heal, which is also difficult. And it might not be the easiest way to heal is to run away, but to actually face the demon, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, if we don't talk about our mistakes, how do we get through them? Because I don't think there's a book that's going to stop somebody from making a mistake. But there could be a book that becomes a reference and part of somebody's brain that says, okay, maybe somebody might read yours and say, I don't think I should blame that 12-year-old girl for what happened. Or maybe, maybe there were extenuating circumstances. Maybe just the genuineness of the emotions and the reactions of the world, of the fact that even the young kids, adolescents, people, we sometimes dismiss them, but I think it's important because they have perspectives too. They're learning about their world. And I love that book's yours, this storytelling. You've connected me inevitably. I now feel like I'm from Hawaii, even though I'm not from Hawaii.
Okay. that's, that's really sweet. The books that I love reading are those that give me something to reflect upon. And that includes fiction and nonfiction. And actually, even nonfiction is a kind of reportage or storytelling, especially if it's like history, or you're having to recount something that was in the past. It's not happening in this moment, and in some cases you're having to interpret it. So it's still, even nonfiction, you're bringing to life something that is a story, and it's how do you, it teaches you things, I think, about, and as you said, gives you perspective.
It does. And you avoided, there's so many things that are tropes out there. I love reading about the tropes. And your heroine, it's not a hero's journey, but it's not a heroine's journey either. It is a unique journey that she goes on, that bad things happen to her. Then the spirit gives her like a widget. Here, look, I'm going to give you a magic wand. And
Yeah.
unlike certain British kids, she doesn't automatically use it. She says, well, I don't know if I should use this or not. Will this make things actually better? And I don't think
Oh,
I've ever
right.
read about a character that did that before.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I will say I was very inspired by the hero's journey, but you're right. I didn't follow it. I didn't follow it like a path ahead.
Yeah, nor the heroines. I mean, there is some
Yeah.
found family that she does, but her found family is not the people that she collects as part of her journey and then they collectively solve it together. It's different, and it's more heroine than hero, but it's still a unique path, and I really loved that.
Oh, thank you. I really wanted her to be someone who was very aware of her choices. And this is actually about Pono and Aloha. This is where those kinds of Hawaiian values come in, is where you're making decisions that you really want the best for everybody. You're not trying to just make a decision that's just going to help me, or,
You
but is going to do detriment to others potentially.
For people living in Australia or Ukraine or Canada, tell them what Pona and Aloha mean.
So Pono, it's po no. Mostly it's translated into righteousness. It's doing the morally upright thing, but it's definitely bringing your best. And aloha means love. And in both cases, you're bringing your best self to a situation, so that you're not just thinking of the goodness of yourself, you're thinking about the goodness of community, the goodness of the land. You're taking care of the land, you're taking care of the water. It's respect and honor, basically.
Right.
It's a very deep concept, actually. It's not something that I can do, and like whole blogs are written about it. Probably whole books could be written about Pono.
Well, I kind of feel like you did.
But a lot of aloha is usually taken for being hello and goodbye. You're greeted with aloha at the airport, you're given a lei if you're a tourist, or even if you're a friend. A lot of times you're greeted with by your friends or family at the airport with a lei. But it does mean hello and goodbye, but it definitely means love, compassion, friendship. These, you can have Pono and aloha. You'd be experiencing it with your neighbors, or in a work situation where you would want to, everybody would be wanting to bring their best decision making to a work situation that's good for the community in that job, that kind of thing.
So is there going to be a sequel called Mahalo Flips the Tables on the Zero Sum Game?
Yeah, I know. Zero sum, and most people know what zero sum game means, which is more about like if you're dividing things up, if it's life is a pie, right? And if you're dividing things up, if I get a big piece of pie, somebody else is going to have a smaller piece. And typically greed, if you want to just make generalizations, greed operates with this dogmatic expression that, I need to grab as much as I can because if I don't, somebody else will.
Yeah.
So,
And there's so much that isn't. Like, I've worked in places where they have not given somebody a promotion because they were like, oh, well, I can't give them and not give this. I'm like, it's not pie.
right.
You can just recognize that this human being has done good things and has risen up and up leveled herself and is now performing in new ways. And it does not take away from that guy over there that he got a promotion. She could also have one for different reasons. And it's not pie. They can both have some.
They can. And, because capitalism we're reaching a point where capitalism maybe needs to be wondered about with greater concern around compassion and empathy. I hate to say that capitalism is all bad or all good. Once again, it's not evil. It's done some interesting things to society in that in terms of technological progress, capitalism really supports that innovation. But at the same time, if you don't bring a very strong moral code, like say, and I'm using Pono and Aloha here, to a capitalist endeavor, then you might make choices that are completely selfish and not considering of anything else but yourself. And that's where I feel it goes too far, capitalism.
Exactly. And I loved that you gave kind of a modern Hawaiian development and that it's all at the beginning. The big thing is, hey, there's a Hawaiian shrine but we want to put up apartment buildings or even, but not
right.
apartment buildings because I live in a city where we need more apartment buildings, but they are not as profitable. So couldn't we do this thing that makes it even more profit? And if you maximize all the profit in the world, then you're living in a theme park instead of a community.
Right. Well, this idea that we have to keep that everything is about growth. Everything has to grow and grow and grow. Our economy must always grow. And you wonder, what are the limits to that? Because it can't keep
Well,
growing.
we're starting to see things that are sustainable, like, hey, we like the cork from trees because they keep growing new cork and that's cool instead of, hey, let's not make corks out of dead dinosaurs because that's already a problem and they're just trying to find more and more uses that keep the oil industry going. And we remember the Graduate and the future is plastics. They were ugly, right? But what if with sustainability we could have corks forever?
Well, and plastic is becoming forever. And also the chemicals, what do they call it? The microchemicals that get into our system now.
Yeah.
That's permeating our water and these are, once again, if we're making decisions that future generations are going to regret or could impact ourselves really negatively. And if climate change, you can use your imagination in a dystopian way and wonder about the end of humanity, or at least such a reduction that there's going to be just groups of humanity living in sporadic locations and having to regrow themselves into a society again.
What I loved about your beautiful heroine in this is she's not an eco warrior. There's plenty of stories about that. She's not,
Yeah.
she's one that's merely starting to observe it and say, question. I love that people are questioning a little bit more like, wow, I don't have the science to know if this is good or bad, but maybe we could investigate it. Hey, I don't know whether this is good or bad, but let me go look into it. And that I thought was a really beautiful message and perspective. And that's one of the reasons most that I really liked the Pono and Aloha.
Well, thank you. I think my place wasn't to sit here and judge. It was to bring questions to the table and maybe get people to reflect on things that they might not reflect on ordinarily, or even if they are, or maybe they are sitting in a place of judgment, and you could, you ask a question, and it's like, is it really right to sit in judgment of that, or something like that?
There's that moment when she realizes that I've had a really nice, cushy life. If I want to embrace this alternative, non-capital, capitalism is evil, blah, blah path, we're going to be poor. And what does that mean for me? And that is also something that I don't think anybody has ever just said straight up, like, wow, you are going to have less. You might have to
Yeah,
eat hamburger helper. You might,
right.
is that aging? Not hamburger. I meant macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She wasn't ever gonna, right. Well, that's the the alternate realities. If we could do the good we wanted to, what would it look like?
Yeah,
Especially in a world with billionaires, when you have billionaires, is it, you don't need all that. Yeah, why can't you share? Why can't you give a little more to the world? And I guess there's people that would argue, well, they are giving to the world, but they're giving their intelligence around technology, or they're giving their influence or whatever. But if they're not doing it in a way that really benefits a lot of people, if they're just hoarding their money, and it's a lot of them, you just see them, they're traveling and they're taking control in ways of the government through their lobbying efforts or whatever. They're taking control in a way that benefits them and not so much society. And keeping people poor, keeping the working class and poor people in their place, I think, in their brains, instead of really allowing them to be lifted to a better life, which they could afford to do.
like I said, I enjoy your perspective on that so much. I was wandering around your website, and I have to say, I also loved your job searching 101, early signs your employer
Oh,
may be a jerk.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That short story made me laugh. I've gone on interviews of places in my career and had somebody go, well, why do you want to work here? Like, the way you ask that question makes me want to wonder that too.
Yeah, it's like, maybe I don't. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you love about it? What do you hate about it? And maybe there should be a little bit more honest people saying, well, yeah, I want to hire you because I like you, but I got to warn you, I think your boss is a dick. And nobody's
Yeah.
going to do that.
Well, and then I'd love to be honest and say, I'm not sure about this place because I haven't worked here yet. But you know what? I need money to survive. So I need this job.
Yeah, and that's real too, because survival is important. First, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you have to eat. Maybe you don't need a roof over your head, but it's better for you. And, you need clothes on your back. But to expect people to live with the minimums, which is kind of what I hear happening in certain parts of our society with and how they dole things out, or if they expect if you're not working, you're just lazy. That really there might be more to the equation than that. Those kinds of things. That's not Pono. That's not Aloha.
Exactly. What are you doing to make the world better? Which one of the things I love that you're doing is writing. What are you working on now? What's your next step?
Well, I'm about, I don't know, halfway through a first draft on a novel about a last group of people, a race of people that are cat shifters. They can shift into cats.
Okay.
So they're like, and the reason they're dying out is because they live within humanity, but they're so feared because they're of their otherness that they've been slowly been killed off, so there's that. And I'm also working on a little fairy tale. It's maybe one or two passes away from being done, but it's a chapter book for kids that I would just basically need to have illustrated or something. I'd have to figure that out. I'm still working on it.
So make a contact thing on your website. Hey, you illustrators out there, go send Dawn samples of your work. Maybe there's a collaboration that can happen here.
Well, there you go. That's fun. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Why not?
Yeah.
My half sister is going to do the cover for one of my books that I'm going to put out soon, and why not?
Yeah, why not? My husband and I, we thought about working on it together too, because we did the illustration for the cover and for our cover, for Pono and Aloha.
It is a beautiful cover, so do send me a picture so we can put that up there because it's pretty.
Oh, to send you a picture of the cover? Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, I always put covers and links and pictures to the fascinating things we discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. So, Dawn, on this episode, please send us a cool picture of maybe you, maybe your cover, everybody who want to see and meet you and feel like you're their cousin slash sister slash great friend that they needed to know about that talked about important things.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking so much time with us today. And so the book is Pona and Aloha versus the Zero Sum Game.
It's Pono. Pono.
Pono. I keep saying Aloha and Pona. Pono and Aloha versus the Zero Sum Game. Just released. It's available on Amazon.
I think it probably that it rhymes if it's Pona and Aloha.
Well, I still want you to write the Mahalo version because when I was in Hawaii, let me tell you, I think Mahalo means everything from thank you to suck it, there's nothing you can do. Like, hey, we just canceled your hotel room and you're stranded. Mahalo. Like,
Yeah,
there you
that is an interesting title, Mahalo. Mahalo zero. Now you got me. Mahalo zero sum game.
go. I'm just saying it seems like a naturalist, so we'll talk
Yeah.
later. I have a theory. Well, thank you again for visiting with us today, Dawn. Super appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed it and thank you. It was fun talking to you.
You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh, John Schmidt, and Ksenia Cherneevskia. Our intro and exit music is performed by Michael Ingberg, who lives down under in Hervey Bay and runs Tin Can Music School. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal, Designs, The Bean Scene, Arm Street, and wherever you take your notebook and laptop to write. And hey, thanks for listening.